Okay, I'm going to show you how to sew together your scrub cap. So this is piece A, and you can see the top has the large curve, the bottom has a softer curve. There's the clip mark or snip mark in the middle that indicates the center. And this is piece B. We're going to line up with piece A at that snip mark so that they're centered perfectly. And I'm going to show you how to pin it together all along the edge so that you've got it all pinned together before you start sewing. Now I don't do it this way, and I'll show you how I do it, but if you like to have it all pinned together, you can do it. You can do that. So kind of whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm bringing it around to where the end of the seam will be, and pinning that along the bottom. And now this all needs to be worked in. So about every inch, inch and a quarter or so, inch and a half, you're going to put a pin in. I'll put it in fast motion because it's tedious. And one thing you'll notice about me is I'm kind of fussy, so I'm always adjusting things as I go. But this will, you kind of work along there and make sure you've got it. Sometimes you can go halfway down and pin it so that you're sure you're getting your fabric kind of evenly distributed along there. Okay, and then did the same thing on the other side. Pinned all the way along, and there, it's ready to sew. All right, so this is how I stitch them together. I don't pin them ahead of time, as I said, but you've got just the one pin there holding those center slit marks together. And I'm a quarter of an inch from the edge. Top B on top of piece A on top of piece B, and pinned. I took the pin out, get going, and now you'll keep those edges matched up and keep your presser foot a quarter of an inch away from the edge. Work your way all the way down. And then sometimes I'll just double check and make sure I'm going to meet at the bottom. And if you want to, you can also put a pin in there. I don't always do that, but probably wasn't even necessary there. But it is something you can do just to help make sure you end up at the right spot. Keep those edges lined up. Remain a quarter of an inch away. Right down to the bottom. Back tack. And you've got the right side done. Now what I normally do on the other side is I don't flip my fabric over. I keep the piece B on top and keep my fabric to the right, which is not normally how you'd sew. Normally you keep your fabric to the left when you're sewing. But here I wanted to keep piece B on the top. It just tends to make a little bit more consistent application or consistent sewing here. So I'm doing the same thing. Keeping that at a quarter inch and lining up the edges. When it's finished, it'll look like this. All right, so that's the two pieces assembled. And now we're going to do the top stitching. Open it up like this, and you're going to stitch from this side, but you don't flip it right side out. It works best if you can kind of sew into it when it's still inside out. And I'll take that seam, I'm going to work on the right hand seam, I'm going to take that seam allowance and flip it to the left. Now you're going to keep it flipped underneath there to the left the whole way around and stitch at 1/8 of an inch. This may be kind of basic for some of you who've done a lot of sewing, but it helps just to mention. And the 1/8 of an inch is really going to give you a nice professional look of ready-to-wear clothing. If you get too much farther away from the seam, it gets a little more puckery and just doesn't look as professional. You'll see I'm reaching underneath with my thumbs the whole time, so I'm feeling, especially with that left thumb, to make sure that the seam allowance is still underneath, feeling with my index finger as well to make sure that that's still turned to the left underneath. Bring it all the way down to the bottom, to the end, and you'll see how really nice and professional that top stitching looks when you do it like this. So there's what it'll look on the black side. Excuse me. That It has the 1/8 inch top stitching. Yeah, really looks nice. All right, now we're going to assemble the 2 halves. All right, so you've got the other shell assembled now as well and top stitched, so they're ready to put together. You're going to take one of these, just whichever you choose, and flip it right side or inside out. And then you're going to put the other one inside of it so that right sides match up. Double check this. I've stitched mine together without right sides matching up more than once. And it's a pain because you have to take it all apart, obviously, once you realize what you've done. Line up those center marks. And pin it. Sometimes I do this double pinning. I know some people use clips. I've just never used them. They might work great as well. But you're going to get down, pin it as you go all the way down and down to the bottom corner. It should line up. Sometimes there's a little variation. You'll see that when I'm stitching around the bottom. Sometimes there's some variation in the way that they fit together, but it's not fine tailoring. You can make adjustments and have it look really very nice. All right, so that front edge is pinned. Also, when you pin this front edge together, leave a gap. So between those 2 double sets of pins, you won't be stitching. Now here's the bottom edge. You're going to line up the seams with each other, one on top of the other, and pin it in place. Both of those seams. And sometimes you'll have a little extra fullness there. Now here I'm kind of sliding it over to work out that fullness, but that means you'll have some of the black sticking out on the edge. Like I said before, it's not a real crucial thing, but I'll be more exact here than I might be if I was doing it myself. Just so you can see, there's a little bit of overhang there. Since we have 1/4 inch seams, you don't want that much variation in the way that they line up. So I just clipped it off so that it lines up evenly. And this side, pull the seam up to meet. And if you end up with a little bit of extra fullness, like here, I chose to, instead of moving it over and clipping it off, and what I'm going to do is pin the 2 seams together, one on top of the other, and then this fullness, rather than have one larger fold there, I'm taking a little bit of it, pinning it, and then another little bit of it and pinning it. So you're kind of easing in that fullness, and a lot of you have sewn a lot know how to do this. The reason that it won't matter if there's some little tucks in the seam is that there's going to be a piece of elastic with a casing once we flip it inside out or right side out, and you won't even see it. All right, now you need to put a pin in where you're going to start stitching along this edge. You've got the 1/4 inch seam, and then we need to leave an opening for the ribbon on each end. There is a marking on your pattern for this, but if you want to just measure it as you're going here, it's about, see, there's the 1/4 inch seam. I just pinned that so you can see where it is. And if you come out from the edge of the fabric, it is 1 1/8 inches or so. So that allows for your 1/4 inch seam and gives you some space to insert your ribbon. If you have narrower ribbon, you can make this hole a little bit smaller. So there I'm measuring from the 1/4 inch seam. It's just under 1 inch. So you can see it's not, again, it's not exactly, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just how much room do you need to put your ribbon in through that hole. So that's what you do, and do it on each end. It's already, the other end already has a pin in at the right spot. And that's where you're going to start sewing. You also just double check this. There's a little bit of extra fullness in the black there, but it's not going to matter. All right, you're going to use your free arm to do the rest of the stitching on this cap. So now we're stitching along that front edge, that edge that goes around the face. You can see the top of it there, that's the neck edge. So the front edge is 1/4 of an inch. You're going to go all the way around, just leaving an opening to turn it right side out. So 1/4 of an inch away up to this double set of pins. Like I said, it doesn't matter where that opening is. I just put it along that front edge somewhere. 1.5 inches is good amount, easy to get your fabric through that hole. So now continue around to the other corner, keeping it at 1/4 of an inch. So you'll be starting your seam around that neck opening at that pin, leaving a spot for the ribbon. So get it lined up for 1/4 inch, back tack, so that you can, so it's reinforced. And oftentimes over the seams I will do kind of a back tack just to reinforce over the top of the seam. There, you can see me doing it there. Just gives a little bit extra, just to be sure. Since the seams, there's potential for them to split open, although it's unlikely. Now we're working over those areas where we had the little bit of fabric easing. And down to the pin on this end. All right, and in the next video, we'll show you how to clip this, turn it right side out, and finish it up.